Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Okay, anything could happen today. I'm just going to throw that out there first. Initially, what I wanted to do was Gerald Chipeur, former Prime Minister Harper attorney and the former General Counsel for the Conservative Party of Canada. Also, he's the connecting tissue, I like to call him, between the Conservative government, or the Conservative Party at least, and the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. He's a lawyer for the cult, the PBCC, and he is also, obviously an insider when it comes to conservatives in Canada. So he has been in the news because he went on a trade mission with lame duck Premier of Alberta, Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney has decided that with 2 months left in his reign, that he was going to go on a walkabout to South Korea as a lame duck premier, and he decided to bring Gerald Chipeur along with him. To which I said, "Okay, let's do a show about Gerald Chipeur." We've mentioned him before. I've had these two guests on before as well. Their names are Richard Marsh and David Wallace. And they have been on Blackballed several times. Richard, how are you, buddy? I'm going to see if I can find David here. Here's David. I just want to say off the bat, just for people watching or listening or saw my tweet, Vinny Paz is in the building. We're just trying to get his tech to work. So he's here. Let's see if he can hear us this time. Vinny, you there? Not yet. He's trying. Vinny, if you can hear me, I'm going to remove you again, and then you're going to click the link again, because I'm not sure what's happening, but we cannot hear you at all, brother. So I think you have a settings issue. So there you go. Okay. David, Richard, welcome to the show, guys. How are you?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Just to get it all out of the way from the beginning, I think my mic's a little hot here. David, you were hired by Gerald Chipeur. This is something we've already said, so I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I do want to talk about that and a couple other things. You were basically hired by Gerald Chipeur and company, let's put it that way, to find Richard Marsh and eventually hand him over to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us why I have Vinny Paz on the show today, former boxing champion, so that people aren't completely confused? Not that they would be anyways.
Well, Vinny's a friend of mine. I've always been a big boxing fan, and I used to make the trip to Rhode Island or Foxwoods Resorts or Atlantic City and watch Vinny fight. So we developed a friendship, and Brad Mitchell, who the Klondike Papers, his company, Klondike Lubricants, the Klondike Papers take their name from that business. Brad Mitchell requested of myself that he had some accounts which were messy in the United States, and he wanted me to collect the money. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was during Mitchell's foray into PPE equipment sales. He had sold gloves and other paraphernalia to a distributor. He bought them. That's right, too. He bought these gloves from a distributor, and he claims the distributor ripped them off. So Mr. Mitchell wanted me to go down and have a conversation with these people. And then he suggested perhaps we could send somebody who liked to ride motorcycles instead, or a whole bunch of them. So he had me contact my friend Vinny, who was very close friends with a gentleman named Chuck Zito, who was the sergeant at arms for the Hells Angels at one point. And we hooked up Mr. Zito and Vinny with Mr. Mitchell from the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. And The Tasmanian devil and one of the Hell's Angels were conversing with one of God's soldiers, I guess.
Well, what does it mean? Invoice for V gloves? Listen, I just got the document. I didn't have time to redact some of this stuff, so I'm just going to read it. I do have it. It's from Kevin Mitchell. Is that his brother, Brad's, or son?
Nephew.
I guess.
Nephew?
Yeah. You've got the wrong document on the screen.
No, I know I do. I don't have the actual document that I'm not going to put on this. There shouldn't be any document on the screen right now, but
okay, maybe that's it. Yeah.
Okay. But the document that I'm reading is from Kevin Mitchell. It's to David Wallace, and it's also to Brad Mitchell. This is the Ox Tools email. This is what you're talking about, isn't it, David?
Yes, correct. Absolutely.
Okay. Is it in code, or are they really after gloves?
Well, apparently Mitchell had paid for them, and this guy stiffed him. That was his story. But since Mitchell would rather climb a tree and tell a lie than stand on the ground and tell the truth, I don't know what to believe. It's probably somebody else he was playing games with, but who knows?
So is this like a dog the bounty hunter kind of situation? And is that legal? I'm just curious.
I'm guessing it's highly illegal, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Maybe you need a TV producer or a TV show in order for it to be legal in the United States of America. It just gets like more bizarre though. Like this entire thing, like is Gary Coleman going to come back from the dead and make a cameo appearance in this story? Because it is pretty. Oh, so I'm sorry, Richard. Gary Coleman was a child star who was in this show called Different Strokes. Just
okay.
Sorry, we always have to explain pop culture references to Richard because he was in a cult.
Well, the hierarchy of this Plymouth Brethren Church, it's definitely different strokes. I think it's apropos.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
Just to make the connection here,
please.
Brad Mitchell is involved with various businesses. His own business is Klondike Lubricants. But in this case, he's using his Ox Tools, wearing his Ox Tools hat. He's the CEO of Ox Tools Canada, where Ox Tools is a company owned and founded by Dean Hales, who's son of Bruce Hales, the so-called Man of God, or Mog. So this guy is kind of the crown prince of the Plymouth Brethren. He's expected to succeed his father when his father pops his clogs. And he's a mega multi-billionaire businessman. And Brad, when the pandemic came along, a lot of Brethren businesses connected with the Hales family leapt into the PPE market, usually with the assistance of conservative governments who gave them generous contracts. So Ox Tools, who supplies hammers and saws, suddenly found itself in the business of trying to provide masks and gloves. And this particular invoice involves an order for $500,000 worth of nitrile exam gloves from a company in Texas, which Brad Mitchell had paid for but not received, and then he's very urgently wanting to get his money back.
Oh, poor Plymouth Brethren guy got ripped off. Go figure.
Yeah.
So Vinny Paz is there again, but can you hear us? Vinny, can we hear you? Are you there?
Vinny, maybe you can get your girl to check the settings on your camera, or maybe use her phone.
Is there a millennial near you, Vinny? Find a millennial. They will help you with your phone.
So that was a Hales guy you had on screen earlier. Boy, those guys don't miss many meals, do they?
No, they don't. Okay. Now there's text messages that I want to show too, but I need to figure out exactly what I'm looking at here. So is this the first one or is this the first one? Or is this the first one? No, it's this one. This is the first one. Okay. This is between Alan Hallman and you, correct, David?
I believe so.
Okay, an invoice. This is Alan Hallman, and Alan Hallman who is he again? He's a political fixer.
He's a drunken axe man for a bunch of goons in Alberta.
Okay.
Basically, don't give him the dignity of calling him a fixer. He's an alcoholic loser.
Okay, this is where I have to be.
That's all personal opinion, and certainly do not reflect the views of the Blackballed media or Dean Blundell network. Just my own personal opinion.
I think I'm supposed to say that part.
I know. I just said it for you. And Alan, I'm available. Send your lawyer to sue me if you don't like it. If you're sober enough to hear it.
These are the opinions of one David Wallace, and do
It
not
absolutely, they are
necessarily
my
reflect
opinions.
Blackballed or its subsidiaries, of which I have none.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, an invoice I made for you to sign and get back to me. Then I can send you the remainder. I'm in Edmonton for the night and having dinner with Jerry to ensure all the power work is getting done. What is he talking about?
What was the context to?
The context is, so you were saying you have Jerry has a check. Does he want me to pick it up? I'm meeting him in half an hour and we'll push it. So this would be about the remainder. I think this is the Richard Marsh stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, basically, I found Richard, and okay, so I was supposed to get a drop of cash. The moment that I provided proof that I found them, I provided video evidence, I provided the whole 9 yards. I wouldn't give them location, but that wasn't called for. What was negotiated and agreed to was that I would get my payment the moment I found him, and once they gave me the warrants that they would get Richard, that's when they started to stall. But we had already pretty much figured by that time that that they were trying to play a game with us.
Right. Vinny, do I hear you? Okay, Vinny's still trying. I'm gonna keep trying with Vinny. I hope he gets on there.
I hope
Vinny
he gets
Paz.
on too.
Yeah, I know. Vinny Paz, you need to find a millennial, brother. I'm not trying to be a dick, but like, your settings. It's about your settings. I don't know what kind of device you're on. If you could call David, or David, if you could call him, that would be great. I'll mute you while you do it. Okay.
Okay.
You can try that. Okay. All right. So, Richard, when you read stuff like that and you know that you're I mean, we've talked about this before, but when you know that you're the subject of an actual manhunt, what is going through your mind reading about it? Like, I mean, you lived it, so it's a little bit different, but when you see the way they communicate, what is that like for you?
Well, it's kind of mind-blowing how serious they were and how they kind of regard me as a dangerous enemy. I mean, I think in one case there's a sort of a joint email between them saying, well, let's circle the wagons, guys, and see where we are, as if they're sort of in their minds, they're these kind of Wild West posse chasing down some dangerous criminal. I mean, it really is. It's the language of special forces, isn't it? The language of police homicide departments.
Yeah, it's like they're ordering widgets,
Yeah.
like it's not, they don't seem to have any, wherewithal when it comes to, speaking to each other in a way where it treats human beings as if they're not human beings. And I find that very strange to see that, to actually witness that. And the motive behind it obviously was because you blew the whistle on something in the United Kingdom that you're still kind of not really allowed to talk about. And so this is like a multi-continental hunt for you. And it ends up in the lap of David, who I don't think we can hear anymore. Can we hear you, David? No, we can't hear you anymore. No. So I'm kicking you out and you can come back in. So when you see that, when you see those words, I mean, I'm looking at that, and if they're talking about me, I would be livid, that I would be treated like I was just some sort of, product that they're discussing. They're discussing fees. When am I going to get the rest of the money to hunt down James? Like, I would be a little. When you see the evidence of it, that's what I mean.
Yeah, it's a sort of language you'd use if you're hiring pest control to get a raccoon out of your attic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is exactly like that.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, this was by the time I saw all this, the crisis had passed. So, but if I'd been seeing it live, it would have been, profoundly disturbing. And in fact, what I did see and experience was very, very disturbing, to put it mildly. And particularly for my wife, who was just an innocent collateral damage in all this, because they were stalking her and hunting her down, following her through the streets, purely with the object of finding me, with absolutely no regard whatever for her own feelings or her safety or anything else. I mean, they just didn't care.
And your wife is, first of all, she's lovely. I've met her. She's super nice, and she's Jamaican, and they were using epithets when discussing her, weren't they? In some of these communications.
Yeah, Brad Mitchell referred to her as a coon. That was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And and so, David, do you remember before we got on the show, my first rule was if you're going to use a phone, just don't walk around with it. So thanks for that. You're now frozen in time. What?
I'm good. Send Vinny another link. Send Vinny another link. Maybe that's that one. He's tried everything. So we think maybe the link's bad.
Okay. I don't think the link's bad, but it's going to be the exact same link. I can email it to you.
I just text it to Vinny to his number.
It's the same link. It'll be the same link. It's not.
Okay. Well, he says he's clicked it. He said he's clicked it. He's done everything. Opened the settings on his phone. It's just not coming on.
Okay. Well, listen, I'll try again. I'll email it to myself, and then I'll get the email, and then I'll text it to him. But it will be the same link.
But in regards to Brad Mitchell, the very first time I spoke with him, that was the one thing that really struck me. After the buildup of his religious credentials and this community that he was in that Gerald Chipeur gave me, Brad Mitchell's very first words to me after hello, when the name Dr. Karat Singh came up, and again, I'm going to quote this man, Brad Mitchell, not my words, his.
Wait. If it's the N word, don't say that. Just don't.
No. This was about Dr. Karat Singh. He used a racial slur. Basically the very first words out of his mouth was taken aback.
Okay, David, can you go back in the house and sit down? Okay. I had Max. I'm a little bit annoyed. I had Maxime Bernier on last night, and the audio sucked. And why did the audio suck? I should probably explain this to everybody. When guests use tablets or phones, the audio breaks in and out. That's what happens with tablets and phones. It even happens a lot of time with headphones. At first, I thought it was me. But I have Starlink now, and I don't know if any of you guys out there have Starlink. It is the greatest internet ever invented. It basically never goes out. It's faster than anything I can think of, and it's great. It's the people that I interview are just people without laptops, and for some reason, my software only allows people with laptops to have a seamless experience on the on Blackballed. Now let's get David back in, who's still walking around. David?
I'm on the step. It's perfect on my end. There's absolutely no connection issues.
Okay. Don't move. Okay, please. You're pacing.
I'm not moving.
You're doing the political fixer thing where you're mulling things over, you're ruminating, Can you explain who Brad Mitchell is for everyone who doesn't know? Please.
Brad Mitchell?
Yes.
Brad Mitchell was introduced to me as a businessman who was part of a community. The words religious community were not used. They just introduced him as part of a community. My first interactions with Brad Mitchell came through an introduction by Gerald Chipeur. Brad Mitchell was presented to me as a businessman who owned a company called Klondike Lubricants, and he would be my contact and liaison on the location of Richard Marsh on this job. So that's what I knew of him at the time. Again, seemed odd from the start. Seemed to be very angry, and that was my introduction to Brad Mitchell.
He also made an appearance here at the 2011. This would be the victory speech for Stephen Harper when he won in 2011. That's Chuck Truen, Roy Taylor, Brad Mitchell, Ron Barnes, Ralph Mooney. Richard, if I'm remembering correctly, all of them are members of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, and all of them are American except for Brad, or is Brad Mitchell American as well?
Chuck Truen's from Detroit. He's American citizen. The rest are Canadian.
Okay.
Save that Ron Barnes has now moved to Knoxville, Tennessee, but he is a Canadian citizen.
Okay.
Knoxville is a beautiful place. Too bad that he moved there.
And now a word from our sponsor, David Wallace. Everyone start chewing gum when he's done. It'll be great. David, Brad Mitchell is kind of a key figure in the two stories that I've been working on, and I guess I wouldn't say I was working on the other story, but the story that I'm interested in, other than the Plymouth Brethren stuff, is the conservative leadership stuff, is the seemingly, sure thing that Pierre Poilievre seems to have as far as winning the leadership goes. Now, I want to do this in a way where I'm not going to get into legal trouble, but it's probably, listen, I've already told many people, including other journalists, that when it comes to the Brethren Christian Church, I am not really objective anymore. Like, I've just seen so much evidence that it's just really difficult for me to remain completely objective. That doesn't mean that I don't vet stories that come to me, because I do, but I'm not going, well, I wonder if there's a good argument for them not being a cult. That's an impossible thing. So therefore, I'm just by definition not objective. So what that leads me to, I end up having these ideas of, like, how can I connect this cult to Pierre Poilievre, right? Because naturally, that's what I would want to do, since I'm interested in that story. Now, it is not there's no smoking gun evidence that Pierre Poilievre is like down with the cult and is like, really, woo, Plymouth Brethren, yeah, you're the greatest. There's none of that. But he's always sort of in the vicinity of things, right? So when Stephen Harper got elected in 2006, and he swore what we believe is a Plymouth Bible, and we only believe that because it looks exactly like a Plymouth Brethren Bible. We had you got one in the mail. Richard, you sent me the pictures. I'll go find them, but it is exactly the same. Like, it looks exactly the same. So during that time, Pierre Poilievre became the principal secretary at age 23 to Stephen Harper. So again, that's like playing the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon game.
Chief ball washer.
Right.
I think that's
allegedly. That is an opinion of David Wallace, probably. And David Wallace alone. But the idea of connecting Pierre Poilievre is going to be like a Kevin Bacon thing, like the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everyone's worked with someone who's worked with Pierre Poilievre, if you're a Brethren or something like that. But Gerald Chipeur has always been, to me, the key figure in all of this, because he is the connecting tissue, again, between the party, the Conservative Party, and the Conservative politicians and this cult. So Gerald Chipeur and Pierre Poilievre, other than that whole rumor that they're like half brothers or whatever that rumor is, who is Jonathan Dennis, and how is Jonathan Dennis important to any of this story? I'll start with David.
Jonathan Dennis is the former Solicitor General of Alberta. Also, quite possibly has the worst hair plugs in North America. That's just a personal observation. I don't know if he can sue me for that. And I don't even know if he's a lawyer still. But other than that, Jonathan Dennis is also a very good pal of Alan Hallman. Go figure. They definitely are natural friends. And I was introduced to Mr. Dennis by Alan Hallman, telling me that he had some work for me, and indeed he did. As we've seen the results, it's been published. We know what type of work Mr. Dennis was asking me to perform. That's already a matter of public record. I don't need to bore anybody by going over that again, I imagine. Suffice it to say that Mr. Dennis, and again, this is documented by email that they do not contest to be legitimate and real. Mr. Dennis was asking me to perform a job which would have required me to commit a crime. Which was to hack the phone logs of a reporter.
Yes. And actually that was that news broke what, in the spring, last spring? Something like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And again, I don't want to belabor it too much. I just want to stick to the facts, because I don't want to get you sued. I mean, me personally, all of them that can go pack sand, but I will not say anything that's not factual and has not been vetted and documented on this show.
Allegedly. Okay.
Allegedly.
I'm just going to say that every time you speak. Just
I had to go ahead and name him ex-kid alleged, right? I mean, what the hell?
Allegedly. Okay. But Jonathan Dennis, does he have now? I want to know if I've misheard this or if this is true. So Jonathan Dennis and Pierre Poilievre are business partners or co-owners in some sort of property. What is that, Richard? Are you aware of that?
Yes, they were business partners in some kind of political campaigning business back a while ago. They did sort of phone canvassing. And then they are currently joint owners on a rental property, I believe, in Calgary, Alberta.
Okay. And again, that we're just playing the Kevin Bacon game. This doesn't mean that Pierre Poilievre is guilty of anything. Although it is interesting just to see a lot of the kind of overlapping circumstances that you would say of Pierre Poilievre becoming the de facto benefactor of all things convoy. And I don't want to go down a convoy rabbit hole of where that money came from, David. So we'll just stop you right there.
No, I mean, I don't have any, again, this is unsubstantiated, but my first physical meeting when I got to Alberta with Jonathan Dennis was at a place called Original Joe's up in the west side of Calgary. That evening, he said he was going to an event for Pierre, and it was discussed between Mr. Dennis and myself acting as a security, what would we call it, an insurance policy, and perhaps I would be a good fit with Pierre as he embarked on a run for the leadership. Basically, if anything busted loose, I never, of course, pursued that because everything broke loose, but that was a conversation that myself and Captain Hairplugs had.
Okay. Captain Hairplugs. That's a great that's a great moniker, I guess. It would be weird if I said it, but I guess you can say it. You're like the guy that can say it. Jesus, look at that gorgeous mane of yours. My God. you don't get
like a homeless guy.
You don't get a shampoo sponsor at the end of all this, whatever this is. You know, I'm going to be very disappointed in your skills as a slick talker. You know,
I'm not too slick. I've turned myself into a financially well-off guy, into a pariah with all of my esteemed former clients. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because I always say this shit off air, and I think I want to try to explain it on air so that people understand exactly what I mean. Okay. And David, let me finish, because I know you're going to say stuff like in the middle of it. Okay. So, and stop walking around, please. David, when stories have been pitched from the Klondike Papers, and just full disclosure on the Klondike Papers, they aren't organized as well as they could be. No offense to the person that organized them, but they're just not, because that person that did it was just trying their best, and they didn't really understand how the infrastructure of like journalism would work better if it was organized in a certain way, and that would be by stories. So that's why a lot of editors across the country and reporters that I've talked to have said it's, you know, it's a lot of work trying to like piece the story together, because sometimes they don't know what story they're even looking for. Like someone would have to say to them, like, there's a Naheed Nenshi story in there that's actually pretty good that hasn't been reported on yet. I should have reported on a while ago. Maybe I'll commit to doing it next week or something, but it's all there. All the communications are there. Everything is there. And the thing is that editors and reporters, unless they know that there's a Nenshi story in there, they wouldn't know how to find it unless they just painstakingly read the entire document, which almost nobody has time to do, or more importantly, has money to pay for. And so a lot of reporters that have beats that already exist are like, I don't have time to assemble this jigsaw puzzle together on my downtime unless I'm getting paid. And the editors don't want to pay because of two things. One is that it's hard to vet some of the stuff. And the most important one is the one that David really likes to hear a lot, is that they question the credibility of one David Wallace. Now, wait a second, because here's the weird conundrum. And I was telling Rob Kvikland this off air before the show, is that I think that your existence, David, has created a glitch in the matrix of credibility as it pertains to journalism. And I'll tell you why. You have blown the whistle on shady events that happened that you were an integral part of. Therefore, it's almost a confessional. So they're like, I'm not sure if David Wallace is credible because he's done a lot of shady shit. And I'm just like, David Wallace is credible because he's confessing on the shady shit that he did with these other people. So I don't know if I'm just talking out my ass a lot right there or not, but I feel strongly about knowing where to look in the Klondike Papers to find a lot of the things that you've talked about that are provable with these documents. And I do not accept the lack of credibility of David Wallace as a good excuse for editors to not do their own due diligence and try to legitimize and find tertiary sources and do whatever they need to do. And I think that is a travesty. And one of the reasons why I think it's happening is because Gerald Chipeur is the kind of high profile attorney that he can call the law firm that represents whoever, the media company that wants to report a story. I don't know, but I know that he's high profile enough to make a phone call, and whatever lawyer answers that call is like, oh my God, it's Gerald Chipeur. Oh, yeah, okay. And then gets off the phone and is like, yeah, we can't do any of that. I just got a call from Gerald Chipeur. We got to kill all of this, okay? We do not need that law firm, down our throats, blah, blah, blah. Listen, it's happened to me. It's happened to me when I worked for Post Media, when I got that contract to do a story about a popular, recently retired news anchor. And Christy Blatchford, the late Christy Blatchford, rest in peace, love you. She helped me with that story. She was the one that brought me to Post Media to do it because everything that we had collected up until then was legit evidence. And as soon as I started digging, I called somebody, and I guess the interview went in a certain way where I didn't realize that this girl was going to immediately call the people that represented this news anchor, who then called the Post Media lawyers. And because of who that person was, they immediately just cut the contract. It was Jamie Watt. He's not even a lawyer, but he's still one of those names, right? And so I get a phone call from Jordan Tim at National Post, and he's like, do you know who Jamie Watt is? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, I just got a call from Jamie Watt. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, you have to kill this story. I'm like, why? He's like, because I just got a call from Jamie Watt. And he hung up. And I'm like, really? This is all it takes? So I have a sinking suspicion that Gerald Chipeur is one of these people. I do not have evidence that he's ever called anyone to say anything. But it is very interesting that not one media outlet, and by the way, these are not exactly outlets that are really friendly to conservative politics. I know a lot of people like to say they are. They are corporate conservatives on the board and how they handle business. They are at least centrists or mild progressives with the way that they report. In some cases at the CBC, they can be really progressive in how they report certain issues. So I don't, there is a lot of people who believe that like there's a conservative bias in media reporting because of who they endorse and how many newspapers are owned by Torstar versus Post Media versus whoever. The editorials of most Canadian newspapers are not conservative. It's a when you tell me that you can't publish certain stories, because of the credibility of the whistleblower who's whistleblowing basically on himself. Imagine that. Imagine I've killed 2 people. I killed them in the subway back there. Oh, yeah, you can't trust that guy. He's a murderer.
Yeah, try turning yourself into the police station and say that, and they'll say, no, sorry.
Yeah, there's a Simpsons scene.
That'd be a brilliant way to get away with something, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
There's a scene in The Simpsons where I just watched it with my kids yesterday or something, where Homer walks in and he's like, I'm telling you, there's a guy, there's an alien in the woods, and he just comes in and he says, I'll give you peace, I'll give you love, or whatever. And Wiggum is like, oh, okay, well, let me just move on to my invisible typewriter and I'll just type up that report. And then Homer leaves, and then another guy comes in, he's got a lighter in his pocket, and he's like, I just set a building on fire and I'm going to do it again. And Wiggums is like, oh, let me just type that in my invisible typewriter. So that's how I feel about it.
The important thing is, people bring up a credibility issue. I think what's important to remember is that within these circles, the Gerald Chipeurs, the Alan Holmans, the Jonathan Dennises, the Nathan Jacobsons, the Michael Yurkoviches, and hundreds of others which were in the Klondike Papers, I had total credibility with those people who do have mainstream credibility. When they had a mess or a problem that they needed cleaned up, there was no one more credible in my business than me. I was the one who could do any job, not just slinging insults a la, whatever people you have on Twitter. I could go in, I could find people, I could change people's minds, I could do things, I could literally bring their plans to fruition. So I had total credibility with these people that had been built up over a number of decades in my business. And the Klondike Papers, Richard had them, he organized them. I have to say, I still do not have a copy of the Klondike Papers. These were odds and ends that just got thrown into my machine. And literally, people don't know how to read them. It's not that they say they debunk them. They don't even understand what they're looking at. Case in point, when the Patrick Brown whistleblower story came out, Debbie, Joe Deeden, right away, that was in the Klondike Papers, and no one knew. No one knew. I called you up and said, hey, you might want to take a look at this, because I had had evidence that she had been a snitch on jobs and that we had recruited her for this one. It was, it's all in there. People just, instead of trying to shoot it down, not one reporter has, other than yourself and to his credit, Jesse Brown and Stephen Marr and a few others. But besides those individuals, nobody has taken the time to pick up the phone and said, okay, explain something to me. That means unless the story was ready-made, it didn't go anywhere, and no one asked.
But that's just the way, you know, it's not like no one's really sitting there like spending a lot of time thinking about your credibility, but it is one of those fallback excuses for the fact that they, like, if it was gift wrapped for them, they probably would have reported on it.
Then why are they being the report? Why don't I do the reporting? Why doesn't, I mean, here's the problem. I think it's a lack of initiative on our press, and that's an indictment on our fifth estate. It's a lack of initiative. You're telling me that seasoned news people 30, 40 years ago would not have pursued this story doggedly? You have absolute tangible evidence that has been verified and vetted of money coming into Ontario from sanctioned individuals from the Russian Federation. You have clear evidence of emails going back and forth about fraudulent affidavits. I mean, I'm sorry, but these are stories that needed to be pursued by mainstream journalism, and I think it's an indictment upon them that they didn't. And the excuse that it wasn't ready-made for them, well then, I'm sorry, I'm not the journalist. They are. It's their job. And if they can't make heads or tails of it, maybe they're in their own business.
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and defend mainstream journalism. They don't even let me in the lobby. So it's not like...
You want to be in their lobby.
I used to, that's actually a really good point. I spent years trying to find ways in, trying to work with them freelance. And I did work with a couple of them freelance, Post Media, Toronto Star, a couple of others, right? And it didn't interest me on a professional level or on a work level. It only interested me on a career level. And then one day I was just like, why am I begging these pigeons for crumbs? That's what it felt like. And because you try to grab a pigeon, you can't. That's what it was like me in jobs. I was trying to find jobs by grabbing pigeons and chickens. And then you don't know how freeing it is, like when you wake up one day and you're just like, I don't want to do that anymore. And that was 2018. And I haven't, that was the first story I worked on as an independent, like where I'm not going to bother trying to sell any stories. And I tried to, and look what happened. I don't know if you recall, but Global, I contacted them on Sunday night. On Monday morning, they're like, we're going to sign a contract with you on Thursday. Let's work together between now and Wednesday. Wake up Thursday morning, did all this work, basically became her report. And then when Thursday came and I sent, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for my contract. She's like, oh, I spoke with the producer and they're not going to, thanks for the work though, buddy. Thanks for coming out, wouldn't give me a byline, and then did the report, all my work, even my wording. She didn't even have the decency to edit it. Excuse me. So when it comes to mainstream outlets, you're with a lot of, you're dealing with, first of all, you're dealing with who are like, they're hungry in the same way that first to third year stockbrokers are hungry. You know what I mean? Like they'll sell anything to anyone, their moms, they'll sell sub-mortgage, some prime bullshit to their grandma if they wanted to. And reporters are like, it's kind of cutthroat like that a lot of times. They use people like the way I used to be, people that will do work because they want to get a job, and then they'll spit them out just before it's time to publish. and it's happened to so many people I know. So sorry about the little left turn with the media tangent, but this is part of the reason that we're the only ones that are really talking about it. It's not because, and I know Justin Ling and others have really tried to paint myself, and especially Dean Blundell. He was on a podcast. He was on Ryan Jesperson, who I've had on Blackballed. And this was actually a while back. It was like the day or two after Justin Ling was on our podcast. And he was saying that this podcast and the Dean Blundell show was basically responsible for a left-wing version of QAnon.
Which is such bullshit. I'm sorry to say this, but it's bullshit. Here's the problem. Justin Ling, I know for a fact, okay, through the contacts that I have at CSIS, through contacts I have at other intelligence agencies around this world, he was embedded in that convoy. He is what's known as a journalistic snitch. These
Allegedly.
people saying they're debunking it, they don't even know how to read the damn papers. I can put my record up against anybody, and I'm tired of hearing it. I'm tired of people saying that I put up a GoFundMe like that's some kind of smoking gun. $5,500 and I can't work ever again? Doesn't sound like a hell of a deal. I used to make 5-10 grand in a phone call from these guys, okay? I did this for one simple reason. Richard, who can't mention the thing about Deprox or Deproxin, was a whistleblower by some scumbags in the UK named Fentiman, who sent out, they wanted to silence Richard. That's what this was all about. And he can't even mention it. He can't mention it because these guys are bucks up and they'll sue him or pursue him. But the truth was, Richard stopped a lot of people from getting hurt by malfunctioning and defective medical equipment that was sold through the National Institute of Health over there, whatever the hell you want to call it, on a bent deal from the Plymouth Brethren. I know you don't want to get sued, and this is just my opinion. But the truth is, let's call a spade a spade. The Plymouth Brethren Christian Church is a criminal empire that is built up and uses the sweat equity of their slaves, which are also called members. That's all it is. This is organized crime, hiding behind religion and tax-exempt status. So that's the truth. And that's just the way it is, whether people like it or not.
That was the opinion of David Wallace and does not necessarily reflect the opinions of Blackballed or its subsidiaries that do not exist. Okay.
I'm tired of hiding behind weasel words and lawyers. Again, I'm speaking only for myself. Only for myself.
For me. You know what the funny thing is? I never hide behind weasel words or disclaimers. And that's usually my problem. My problem is that I get the network into trouble. And so now this is like now I'm trying to be responsible. And listen, David, I can say that on a personal note, like the things that you talk about, I've seen the documentary evidence in the form of emails and texts. I know the context because of other emails and texts. I know because of the credibility of Richard Marsh, who co-signs a lot of the things that you have said. And I don't think it disagrees with much of the things you said. Some of the things that you said, though, that you say are the only known by you. And so it is difficult sometimes for us to be like, of course we want to say, yeah, that sounds crazy. And when we're on the phone privately, I'm riveted sometimes. But, you know, unless there is a smoking gun component to the things that you say, even though I trust you when you say it, you know, that's just the bind that I'm in. You know, that's just, you know,
that's the problem when you undertake a criminal enterprise. And make no mistake, Mr. Chipeur, Mr. Dennis, Mr. Hallman, and the other individuals named in this, Mr. Mitchell, they undertook to commit crimes. So that's the problem we face. A he said, she said, because, well, that smoking gun evidence that everybody wants. Do I have a tape where they confess all their sins? No, of course not. But most people who are committing a crime probably don't take the time to confess their sins and put it in writing so that the reporters and the journalists have a nice, neat package to run with. That's just not life.
Can you tell me about the affidavit? The affidavit
Yes.
and who prompted you to sign it? What did the affidavit say, and what was your issue with it? And then did you or did you not sign it? Go ahead.
I got a call from Alan Hallman, who said I had to give Gerald Chipeur a call right away. So I gave Jerry Berry a call. Jerry said that I needed to get down to a Miller Thompson affiliate office, I believe it was Mississauga, and swear out an affidavit. And I said, I ain't doing shit. I ain't swearing out no affidavit. I said, I know where the guy is. No, that's all. But he said he needed this. I said, okay, fine. So he kept sending me an affidavit. sending me it over and over and again. He wanted me to add some words to it. I signed it, but I mean, Jerry, and you have the email chain, he sent it back and forth a half a dozen times. I went down, they presented it to me, I signed it, and away we go. Now, is that illegal? Absolutely. Number two, they told me that they already had warrants. Why they needed this affidavit, I had no idea, but that's when things started to smell in Denmark for me. That's when I started taking a deeper look into Richard Marsh and exactly who he was. And that's when I figured out that he was not a criminal, that he was a whistleblower. Wasn't 100% sure, but I certainly realized that these guys were trying to sell me a bill of goods at that point. The affidavit, Gerald Chipeur wrote it out, crafted it, sent it to me at least a half dozen times, and then I went down and signed it. So whatever I still to this day have never read the affidavit.
Yeah. And that's a lawyer allegedly doing that. You know, that's
Best criminals I ever knew, all lawyers.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, isn't it? Because they also seem to be the most untouchable when it comes to these things. Like, what better occupation could you have if you were going to be the connecting tissue between a corrupt political party and a fucking psychotic, corporatized Jesus worshiping cult? Like, what is the? And sorry, they're more of
alleged.
They're more,
you got to
they're
watch
more
yourself,
Bruce,
James.
Yeah.
Say
they're
allegedly.
Bruce Hales
Say allegedly.
worshiping. They're allegedly at the suckling at the teat of Bruce Hales. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just having some fun tonight.
No, I know.
Figure you.
I know. So am I. Hence teat and suckling. But the idea that there could be any other occupation between these two corrupt, allegedly, groups, other than a lawyer, I can't think of anything except maybe a priest. You know, I don't know. I don't know what my question is, but if anyone would like to talk about how lawyers are able to get away with this stuff. Now, is it more than reputational, you think, David? Do you think it's more about just having the fear of being litigated to death for most people is just so strong that they just get away with
that's
this?
exactly what it is. I think you hit the nail right on the head. I think people look at the potential cost of a lawsuit and the devastating effects that it could have on their personal life and decide, these aren't bad people, but they decide that not my war, and they walk away. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, that's something I thought about too, but when you know what the alternative is, that if you do your job and you turn this man's location over, that you most certainly he's going to meet a bad end, or at the very least be victimized and robbed, you don't really have a choice. It's going to suck. It's going to hurt, and boy, did it hurt, because these guys destroyed me. But at that point, you can't. There's no choice to make. You got to do the right thing.
If has there been any stories about any ex-brethren who have been hunted the way that you were hunted and then found and then handed over? Or like, have you heard of anybody experiencing that? I'm just trying to see how common your situation was to what a lot of people go through.
Well,
I mean, I'm sure it's not too common, but
up till now, yeah, a lot of ex-brethren have been hunted down by PIs, but having found the guy, they then used legal means, legal harassment, lawsuits, and so on to bring them down. Like Gerald Chipeur first came to the attention of the ex-brethren community in around 2004 when he was used to hunt down, again with private investigators, a guy called Tim Twynham, who set up the original ex-brethren website that was critical of the PBCC. And Gerald Chipeur was their point man on that. They hunted this guy down using all sorts of unethical means, and eventually Lee somehow managed to sue him for defamation and breach of copyright because he'd quoted a few lines of Brethren ministry, and basically legally cut the guy's tongue out. And he's still there on Facebook, but he never ever says anything about the Brethren. There's another guy in Scotland. They did exactly the same thing too, and he's had his tongue cut out. He's still there, never says anything about the Brethren.
I would be so broke because I just would not stop talking.
Yeah, me too. Like this. Fuck you, brethren. And
But
Hale's
in
a
my
fat
case,
fuck.
I think they realized that they had run out of legal options because it was very hard for them to pin me down legally, basically because there was nothing to pin me down on. And in any case, I had no resources. I had no money for them to take. They also probably knew that regardless of what they did to me, I wasn't going to shut up because that's my nature. And so
I like
they
that about you.
decided to take the law into their own hands. And I think the connection between these two stories we're talking about tonight, the Chuck Zito, Vinny Paz story and the Gerald Chipeur story, is that if the brethren are happy to hire, as we know they are, someone like Chuck Zito, I don't know if you've got a photo of the guy, but I mean, he's an ex-Hell's Angel boss.
Yeah, Hell's Angels and a guy named the Tasmanian Devil. This is what men of God do. I mean, every day.
The brethren are quite happy, and in fact, specifically, Brad Mitchell is quite happy to hire these guys. Then that gives you a pretty good idea of what they would have done to me if they'd found me.
Well, they're Italian too, so that always makes me defend them blindly. They seem like all right guys.
Well, those two gentlemen who people might say have, not Vinny, but might say have a unorthodox reputation. They were the first people to tell this guy Mitchell, what you're suggesting is nuts, and you need to hire a lawyer. I mean, think about this. You have a former 5-time boxing champion of the world, great guy, Vinny, and Chuck Zito, former sergeant at arms, and they're telling a lawyer. They have to tell a lawyer, a Queen's counsel, basically, that, guys, you need to handle this legally. So what does that tell you about the character of the individuals we're talking about here when Vinny and Chuck took great pains to say, you guys are nuts, you're psychotic, you need to do this legally? I mean, if they're the moral conscience on this, then what does that say about Mr. Brad Mitchell or Mr. Gerald Chipeur? Putting that out there.
Well, it's like anything else. It's like, people who are fancy themselves as powerful try to get people who are dispensable to do their dirty work, right? And
Except Vinny and Chuck are men of honor. So, I mean, they would never do something so ridiculous.
Here's Chuck. I don't think I would fuck with him just because he's the only part of the mustache he doesn't have is the Hitler part. And that is just fucking weird. He's like so anti-Hitler that he's like, I'm not even going to cover my lip in that area. That's kind of funny.
Great guy. Vinny speaks nothing but tremendous things about Chuck.
That was Chuck, though, right?
Yeah, that's Chuck, and Vinny has a much closer friendship with Chuck Zito. And Chuck, the times that I spoke with him, he seemed like a tremendously respectful man. And like you said, he talked a lot of common sense to Mitchell. At least he attempted to, and he took the time to say these are things that you need to handle legally through a process. You can't have people rolling up on other people's places of business. It's not how things are done. I mean, when Chuck offered to actually have a conversation with the gentleman, professional, Mitchell wouldn't have anything of it. He wanted an intimidating conversation. And both Vinny and Chuck told these guys, look, you need to hire a lawyer. You need to do your business properly. So, I mean, they were stand-up guys.
Yeah. I just texted, I just texted Vinny Pazienza one last time to see if he can just sort of make it, because we're running a little bit late. I think there's another show on the docket, so I'm going to want to get off.
Well, if we're running a little late, I wanted to bust one thing. When Vinny was on here after that, and we wanted to announce recently, Jake Paul and Rick Ross, the music impresario, have been throwing out challenges to
Rick Ross, the rapper. So Rick Ross, the rapper, wants to finance a purse between Vinny Pazienza and who?
Well, I'm throwing up Vinny's name. I spoke with Vinny, who's a dear friend of mine, and they might say Vinny's too old, he's retired. And I'll tell you one thing, if they wanted to wait another 5-10 years, then Vinny might be too old. He'd probably still put him in the hospital. But if Mr. Jake Paul wants to have a real fight, perhaps he would pick up the phone and give us a call, because Vinny Pazienza would love to fight him. He names the time, place, and date, but if Mr. Ross would like to put up $10 million, Vinny Pazienza would be more than happy to send Jake Paul packing back to YouTube. So, hey guys, would be a lot of fun. Why don't you give us a call and see what happens?
Yeah, we'll broadcast the fight live on Blackballed. We'll do the whole night.
Vinny Paz 5 times.
Listen, pound for pound, there are not too many boxers in boxing history that are as tough as Vinny Pazienza. Dude broke his neck and came back and became a champion, right?
He did indeed. He did indeed. I saw him fight and win the title against the gentleman. His last name was DeLay, really talented junior middleweight, probably the best fight of his life. And right afterwards, he got into a terrible car wreck and broke his neck. And they said he'd never walk again, let alone fight. And there you go. He went on to win several more world titles, fight Roberto Duran a couple of times, and emerged victorious both times. So hell of a man, hell of a career.
Him and it's funny because I talked to Tom Doyle and George Chavallo's kid as well, because they were on the podcast, and they we're gonna try to do a George Chavallo like an appreciation, like a celebration kind of show. You know what I mean? A tribute, because he has very bad Alzheimer's. He's people are kind of surprised. Some people that he's been around, that he's lasted this long.
What a wonderful man he is too.
Yeah, totally. And when I talked to his son about it, and Tom Doyle was like his right-hand man sort of thing. His lead entourage guy, but he handled everything for George kind of thing. And, Mike Tyson went to see him at the funeral home. Lennox Lewis is going to be on the podcast on that day when we have the tribute for him. We were going to do it like in Canada Day, but it was too hard to get together really quickly. So now we're aiming for like September 12th or 13th, because that's the weekend of his birthday. George Chavallo's birthday. So we're going to try to get a lineup of guys in here. Got
to talk to Vinny about Larry Holmes. Larry and Vinny are extremely close, and Larry, I know, respects George Chavallo tremendously. And George Chavallo, what a hell of a great guy. What a wonderful career he had afterwards, educating people on depression and suicide prevention.
Just the amount of tragedy that man has experienced. Like,
a treasure.
Listen, I'm going to end it there because I think there's a show waiting in the wings. But I'm glad this is more of a casual discussion more than anything else. I would like to remind all of the lawyers out there that the expressed opinions of David Wallace were all David Wallace's opinions, and I agree with some of them, and I'm not going to tell you which ones I agree with, so you can't fucking include me in your lawsuits.
Exactly. You can sue me, Jerry Berry and hair plugs. Send me a lawsuit. Send me a lawsuit. I need toilet paper.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, you can sue me too.
And Jerry, if you're listening, lay off the sweets. You're getting fat there. Okay, there.
You know what? I'm going to tell you this, David, because I told a couple other people, but I thought it was funny. I might have told you when I was staying in that house in Creemore, when I was working on the book and I was broadcasting from there. And that car came a couple times, and I was a little worried, so I'd go out on the balcony to like smoke a joint or whatever. And if I heard a snapping of a twig in the distance, which could have just been like a coyote or a deer or something like that, I literally said this like at least 8 or 9 times. The man you're looking for is David Wallace.
Yeah, they can come and find me. Like there's 8 in the clip and 1 in the pipe. Come and see me.
I swear to God,
I'd be more than happy to send you back to Jesus piece by piece.
I know. That's why it was a winner. That's why I said it, because I was like, I honestly don't think David Wallace would mind if I said this. And in this moment, makes me feel a little bit safer. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, well, if Alan Holman or Gerald Chipeur had anything to do with the goons that would come, they'd probably miss your fucking neighborhood. They'd be drunk. They'd do a shit job. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, gentlemen, it was nice to have you on again. And we'll see you again soon. It didn't go as organized as I would like, but I think I like this better because who wants to talk about Gerald Chipeur for an hour?
Not even his wife. I mean, come on.
All he wants to do is sit at home by himself, pinching his chubby little flanks and thinking that he keeps on getting away with shit. So that's
and he does keep on getting away with things. He really does.
I know. All right, guys.
It is what it
David
is.
Wallace,
what can you do?
David Wallace, Richard Marsh, thank you very much, guys. I'll give you a call sometime soon. Okay.
Always a pleasure.
Bye, Richard.
Goodbye.
Dos vidania.
I don't know what that means. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. Vinny Paz was here. for a couple minutes. We couldn't get his sound to work. I'm a little bit happier with the audio tonight. It's been a real thorn in my side, a source of stress for me when I get tweets and emails sent to me saying, I like your show, but the fucking audio sucks. You guys are right. My audio is usually okay. I could probably use to get a better mic or whatever. But my guests, and please keep in mind that my guests, for the most part, are people who were like churning butter until like 10 years ago. Okay. And I'm not trying to make fun of them. I'm just saying they're salt of the earth people. They, they're not really like technologically advanced, right? Because they did spend a lot of time thinking that the radio was a direct line to the devil himself. So when the Prince of Darkness is thwarting you from learning tech, I can't really expect you to have like your podcast broadcasting shit in place. But holy fuck, it doesn't make for a lot of bad audios. And then the last one was Maxime Bernier. Yesterday, same idea. You can't use tablets and you can't use phones for the most part. It depends on what phone it is. But and that's really my audio problem, everybody. So I apologize for that. Tomorrow on Blackballed, Eric Alper, music publicist extraordinaire, will be joining us. And then on September 6th, what the fuck, are we the first? September 6th, which is a Tuesday, I believe, I will be joined by Canadian rapper, and I would call kind of a living legend, to be perfectly honest with you. Classified will be on the show. And then on the 8th of September, I have Cream of Sad. I will fill in those other dates, the 5th and the 7th and the 9th. I just don't know with whom yet. Shout out to Vinny Paz. I'm really sorry that you couldn't get on the show, but I just got a text and we're going to try to have him on again. So sorry about the false advertising up there. He was on. You saw the square. It had his name. No Vinny Paz. But that's okay. And to everyone in the chat, I looked for a second. Things seem to be going well. And I'm really happy that you guys were here once again to watch. I will now speak slowly as to give myself enough time to go to my desktop and grab the outro for Blackballed. Thank you for watching.
Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.